All right, here we are for Rise of the Labor Unions. It's Unit 9, Lesson 6. Our target today is I will learn why and how labor unions were created. Success criteria. I know I have it when I can explain why we needed labor unions and how they helped the American working class. Our agenda today is, right now, we just got done with the introduction. We're going through this part right now to finish out the introduction. Then we can go to the Rise of Labor Unions lesson. Then you'll have optional videos available for you to watch. Then the lesson vocabulary, and then some activities or an assignment at the end. So, Rise of the Labor Unions. What is a labor union? A labor union is an organization that represents a specific group of workers. In the response to low wages, long work days and weeks, and the harsh and often unsafe working conditions that workers were exposed to, many workers were encouraged to join labor unions. Remember, we talked about some of those work conditions in the last lesson. And so, as a response, people started organizing and creating groups to help fight for the workers' rights. Can you name any professions today where workers are in a labor union? Well, police officers are, firefighters are, auto assembly workers are, airline employees are, a lot of times so our teachers and other professionals are in labor unions. People who represent them to fight for their rights and make sure they're being treated fairly. What is a labor union? Okay, labor unions negotiate with the employer, the company, on behalf of the employees that they represent on the following items: pay and vacation days, work schedules, working conditions, benefits such as health insurance and retirement savings accounts, which are 401k or pensions, among many other items as well. In exchange for union representations, workers pay a portion of their salary to the labor union that represents them. So like, for example, as a teacher, we're part of a group that represents us, and we elect to be. We don't have to, but we elect to be. And so this particular one, we have to pay so much money at the beginning of every year to them to represent us. Well, whenever you set up your payment time. So every year, around August or September is when I usually pay mine. In addition to having a labor union fight for better pay, benefits, work schedules, and work conditions, why else might workers want union representation? What do you think? I don't know. Why would they need representation? Well, for example, firefighters in Texas work for many different employers, fire departments throughout the state of Texas, but they're all a part of the same union. So like each city or county has their own fire department, and so they work for the city. Well, if just that small group of people wanted something from the city can go, forget you, I'll go hire somebody else. But if you have a union that represents all the firefighters across Texas, and they get into a dispute or a conversation with the fire departments or cities or counties across the state, then they have a little more force to go, hey, this is what we should do, and we all should be doing the same thing, and they can get better rights. A union can be formed when workers vote on whether or not they want to be represented by a labor union. If a majority of them vote in favor, they're then represented by a union. In addition to having labor unions fight for better pay, benefit, why else might unions? Well, if you were one of the millions of factory workers in America during the late 1800s and early 1900s, and you wanted a raise, more vacation time, or a safe work environment, and you went to your manager, the boss, to ask for one, or all of these things, do you think they'd listen to you? There's a very good chance they wouldn't. Normally, they're not going to listen to one guy because they might listen to maybe a suggestion, maybe take it into account, but they're not going to make major changes because one person complained about something or didn't like something or wanted something. Usually, it would have to be a pretty good consensus of the employees to say, hey, we want this before they would do something. And a lot of times, the managers themselves don't have control over that. It's the owners. In fact, there's a good chance they'd be fired on the spot if you went to your manager like that. By banding together in a union, workers had much more influence and power and stood a much better chance of successful negotiating for better pay, benefits, work schedules, work conditions, etc. For example, let's say a steel factory in 1895 has 1,000 employees, and of those 1,000, 850 were steel workers. 150 were management, supervisors, administration, etc. If those 850 steel workers were represented by a labor union, management would likely be much more willing to listen and at least consider workers' requests, because if they don't, the result could be catastrophic for the steel factory. That takes us to labor strikes. What is a labor strike? Well, if management and labor unions representing its workers can't come to an agreement on things like pay, work schedules, work conditions, etc., the workers can hold a vote and describe if they wanted to protect management by going on strike. In other words, workers on strike stop working. How could a strike be catastrophic to a business? What do you think? Well, if workers stop working and go on strike, no products are being manufactured or made. The business has less or even no products to sell. The business is no longer profitable. The business owners, shareholders, begin to lose money. Customers begin to get upset and buy products from a competitor. To save money, members of management are let go from the company and on until the business loses too much money and goes out of business completely. As you can see, strikes can be very costly for a business. And Joe Worker out there, with just few skills, can go work for somebody else. Where that business guy is not going to be wanting to go work for somebody else. And if he does, he's making a lot less money than he was at first. So strikes are effective. It's also important to note that if workers represented by a union go on strike, they too face numerous risks. For example, while on strike, workers aren't working and therefore aren't paid. So here's some child laborers on strike here. Many workers represented by labor unions, especially in the late 1800s and early 1900s, could ill afford to go without pay for very long. Today, if workers go on strike, unions may supplement a portion of the strikers' workers' pay. Another reason unions workers pay a portion of their salary to the union is so, for instance, like this, they would arise. So basically pay part of their money to them, so if they do go on strike, they can still get some. The union would start to pay them, not as much as they was making while they was working, but enough to make ends meet so that they can survive, and the company knows that the union is still paying them, so it's not hurting the workers that much, and so they better do something if they want to keep making money. Plus, the longer a strike goes on, the likelihood of that company going out of business increases, meaning everyone that worked there no longer has jobs. Samuel Gompers, kind of a weird name, but that's his name. So, an early union leader, Samuel Gompers, worked in a cigar factory when he was a teenager in the 1870s as a cigar maker. He helped organize a labor union at the cigar factory he worked at, which represented cigar makers. In 1877, when the owner of the factory he worked at decided to lower the wages of the cigar makers, he led the union on a strike. The owners of the cigar factory ignored the unions and Gompers' demands for better wages. Their strike failed. Undeterred, Gompers realized that labor unions would garner more influence and power if they banded together. So, the American Federation of Labor. By 1886, Gompers led the effort to bring numerous labor unions together, forming the American Federation of Labor, the AFL. The AFL would fight for workers' rights, better pay and benefits, improved work schedules, and safer work conditions. Perhaps two of the most important and enduring contributions resulting from the AFL efforts that still exist today are ending the practice of child labor in the United States and fighting for workers to have a standard 8-hour workday. Labor Day. You ever hear of that? I know that because it's always right around my birthday. As workers fought for better pay, benefits, work schedules, and work conditions in New York City, the first ever Labor Day celebration occurred in September of 1882. A few years later, Labor Day celebrations would be taking place in cities throughout the United States. In 1894, Congress designated the first Mondays of September of every year as Labor Day, a national holiday. So now we know about the labor unions. We don't go too in depth because this is 5th grade. So, you get a little overview of what it's like. So later on, when you hear about this in social studies or United States history or whatever you happen to study that's in the social sciences, you'll understand, have some concept of what it is. If you want to learn more, watch the videos and then do your key vocabulary and then move on to your activity and then you're done for the day. Hope you enjoyed today's lesson, and I'll see you next time, guys and gals, for Locke Social Studies. Goodbye.